back to my question. For example, you're talking to us right now, and we have quite an audience out there, and they're going to take this on board and add this to the rest of the stuff we've been telling them. And in a sense, that could act upon the event such that either it won't happen or it may be modified in some form or fashion. Is this all possible?
Or it could be totally transformed. Let's understand that release language could be good or bad. Release language, for instance, might happen on early in the morning on October 7th because some idiot pushes a button and sets off a nuclear bomb, or releases a virus, or does some other nasty thing. Release language could also happen because 25 or 35 or 100 million people wake up that morning and say, I'm not going to take this shit anymore. I'm going to go out there and stand there until they arrest that guy, and something changes. That kind of release language is different, but it's nonetheless release language.
But are you able to tell the difference when you look at what you've got, that it's positive versus negative?
Positive and negative have an interesting connotation within our work and within the lexicon and within language itself, and a lot of it is cultural based.
Well, how about constructive versus destructive?
Destructive. Yes, we are able to tell that. And at this point in our reading, in terms of how we're going through the data, the release language from October 7th onward is not what anybody would consider to be pleasant. So you may want to put a deconstructive nature on it. It's something that we must go through. Let us understand that. A revolution is a horrible, terrible, brutal thing in which lots of emotions and people are shed. But it is a positive thing in the end. Good, bad, whether they win or not. The revolutionary mean is positive. But it brings along with it a lot of brutality and excesses and so on. But you've got to get that out of your system. Just the way that we must have the coming crash in the economic system, which will start on October 7th regardless. The data seems to suggest that regardless of what the trigger event is, that over those next 5 or 6 months, the economic system goes from really, really nasty now to something we don't want to even describe.
That means that things like, I'm going to ask you here, things like food shortages, and specifically because you track English more than any other language, is it focused on the U.S. or is it because the U.S. keeps coming up? Because people do speak English all over the globe and on the internet.
Rather the latter, and because everybody is so focused on the U.S. mostly hating us or denying that hate if you're inside these boundaries, that all those emotions are focused on the U.S., whether you're in the Amazon or you're in Pakistan or wherever. So yeah, we have a tendency to be U.S.-centric, and I frequently apologize to our international readers. We just can't help that.
So what you are seeing in the future, at least in the next 5 months, linked to the October 7th economic situation, is that it's dire now, but it's going to be something...
Brutally true. Okay, this weekend we're putting up a new report that continues to refine that because we're getting in new data. In the market descriptors, the market section there, we're going to be describing it as brutally transformative.
Brutally transformative in your lexicon, what would that mean?
Well, that's a return of the, over time, not instantly, but the return of the equitable balance of population to resources. Here we currently have a situation where 6% of the population on the planet is using 28% of the biota. That 6% had better get down to 6%, because that's what's going to happen. And any of the ramifications from that is all speculation. Will we have food shortages? Sure. Will we have rationing on everything? Sure. Exactly where and when? That's speculation at this point. But it's actually occurring as we speak.
Okay, but in 5 months' time, it will become brutal or unheard of, and
It'll
then
be,
continue from
okay,
there.
Imagine yourself right now in the United States, just a walking around, regular kind of a guy, and 5 months from now, you'll be opening your eyes. Many of these people will be encountering huge amounts of cognitive dissonance because it will be as though they've walked out of their house to just after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they're living in Russia.
And is this a rise in chaos?
Certainly, no question.
Okay, so are you tracking chaos itself?
We do have a chaos subset or context, yes.
Okay, and are you seeing a rise in chaos that continues up to and beyond 2012?
No. Our data sets, as a rule, we start losing granularity at about 19 months. That's because of the nature of language, that most of the language, for instance, that might impact your particular life in any given week, that would extend beyond 19 months, you don't use. You would rarely use language that had that level of duration. So our granularity falls off after 19 months. So we do have some spotty bits of information, and we're starting to put together this new entity that we're calling Future Pop that is going to be about the populace that will exist in about 2018 and what they're going to be doing. But there's curious sorts of inconsistencies that are appearing around 2012. Now that's probably because of the emotional response that everybody has to it, but it could very well be due to the biospheric conditions that we're all going to be facing.
I found a really interesting point that was recurring in some of these reports, which was talking about, in essence, what appeared to be a battle with aliens.
Oh, sure, yeah, we've got really strange stuff in there that suggests, for instance, that we're going to go through a summer of hell in 2009 here in the U.S. that will precipitate a seething anger and so forth into actual bloody revolution. AMRAV 2, we're calling it. And it'll just be part of a global wave of revolution against what we call the powers that be. This is also coinciding with metadata layer that we call secrets revealed, whereas as the revolution goes on, certain institutions will be captured by the populace and the data will be released. It's been hidden for hundreds of years, which again starts its own set of threads and memes about revolution that's been duped. Then as we go forward in time, through 2010, we get into the area where we're starting to get what we call alien wars information about 2011. Now, this has to be understood that the granularity out there is very sparse. We don't have a whole lot of detail. It does appear that this is not some kind of false flag operation. It also does appear that it's humans are involved at many different levels, not merely at a shooting level, but also as perhaps some kind of a prize level. Like, we're what everybody is fighting over, that kind of thing.
Right, you talk about human body parts, etc.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Well, that's actually coming from the release of all the Russian and other UFO information around the planet these past few months. Once that hit all the various different language boards, it really started coming out as to how many of the crashes they had found human body parts cataloged in.
Okay, and just to come round to the election, because we briefly talked about that, you said you don't dial in on personalities, but you do dial in on incidents that seem to be, or the trends around those events, such that you talk a lot in your papers about confusion around the election time.
Correct. Which I think you'd have to agree we're entering into. The Republicans are confused as to why McCain is doing whatever he's doing, and everybody's confused about the economy, and it's all affecting this, and McCain's even confused about whether or not he's going to debate. And it's getting more confusing as we go forward. And we still have information that seemed to indicate McCain was to drop out due to health before actually near the end of September, but really before the 15th of October. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, because we've already seen some of that language fulfilled. He has withdrawn. He announced that he withdrew. It was from the debate, not the campaign, but he suspended his campaign. So the word campaign came in there, and it was due to the economic health of the country. So it was sort of a quasi-hit. The language we'd seen a year ago to that effect about this time actually has started to appear. And that's, George Ure calls this a rickety time machine. And he's got a real good point. There's big gaps in the technology, and it's not like it's foolproof, and this is why we really have to worry about all these people that think it's prophecy and it's going to be written in stone. It just does not work that way. When we're right, we have a tendency to be absolutely spectacularly right. We refine it over time. We're getting better as we go forward, so maybe we'll be a lot more right than we have in the past. And in the past, we've actually done, we think, twice as good as chance should allow. And in that sense, maybe McCain will withdraw finally. His health might not be good, et cetera, increasing confusion. And we've been talking about the fact that there's just basically the dominant word is confusion around the elections. And we've been reporting that since January of this year, but we saw it since probably June of last year.
Okay, one thing that I've noticed is that you actually were talking about McCain dropping out, and yet I think today in the news I actually heard that he has now decided he will debate.
Sure. That's what I'm saying. The stuff we get is not written in stone. What we saw was the appearance of language that said McCain withdraw campaign. Now, we didn't know that there would be other words in between there because of the nature of what we've encountered. Beyond that, we didn't know that there would be any supposition. Now, also we have to acknowledge time is kind of strange. McCain may yet withdraw from the campaign as a whole, and all of that language together was what we saw, even though it's strung out over a number of days.
So it sounds like when you find language that matches and an occurrence occurs, in a sense, it's kind of like solving the crossword puzzle, or in a way, it's almost like the Bible code. The words themselves get...
I would dispute the Bible codes business, because the Bible codes will work on any sufficiently long text, and even if you were to unscramble our DNA and just put it out there as the various key letters, the Bible codes will bring back what you think might be meaningful. And that's not how we do stuff. But it is true that this is not deterministic, and we don't know exactly how time will work out, and there are a whole lot of